Most families I work with say that making the actual invitation to their loved one is the scariest part of the intervention. And look, it's likely the same with traditional surprise intervention when the family worries their loved one is going to run out of the house and they'll never see him again at the surprise. But that rarely happens with interventions that are invitational based. But I understand the fear for sure. Understand this. Once the invitation is made, the intervention begins. If you use this invitational model, like more than 1,000 interventions that I've done over the years, you're likely, as in very likely, to get your loved one to say yes. So to the fear factor that so many have on the intervention, though, I totally get it. Fear is that notion where we're standing on the precipice of something incredible, and the little voice in your head nibbles at your brain and says, forget about everything and run. You got to get out of here. So for those I support with this intervention work, fear is a normal response. So welcome it, and then let me help you push it out. I've had clients over the years, as well as patients, that have wanted to put the brakes on the intervention at the last minute and not meet because they were so apprehensive that their loved one would just get up and walk or get up and run. And that rarely happens. And remember, no is a conversation starter, and that when we make the invitation, the intervention begins. We have about 140,000 alcohol-related deaths in America a year. We have record, it just keeps going up every year, drug overdoses every year. And so buck up and tighten up. This is a scary thing to be dealing with, no doubt, but it's scarier to do nothing, for example, than to do something and walk through it. Breathe in hope and knowledge that you're doing the right thing, the good thing, and exhale, really push the air out and exhale the fear that you'll screw this up because you're not going to make things worse. And if you're the one making the invitation, that is, you're requesting participation from your loved one, I want you to not just go cold. You write your invitation down first. It's like a script. I want you to get to know it and get comfortable with it and get to know the words, because they are unlike anything you've said in the past in this order. And you want to deliver them with power and comfort. And that doesn't mean that you have to yell it out. That means that power comes in all different volumes. And I've found that actually lower volumes increase effectiveness in not blowing things up. And know this too, that you're not going to be judged. There's no Oscar for the first reading, but when you recite it and practice it a few times until the words become cemented in your brain, and you'll find the courage to speak them increases as your comfort level builds too. And think of yourself as an actor, really, in your favorite scene, and the one that won your favorite actor an Oscar for excellence. And just know that they practiced the biscuits out of that scene. And so I want you to do something similar. You write the script. You get to know the script, and then you stick with the script. You don't change it. You deliver the invitation from the script. You're doing good. I know it's scary, and you're doing good. And this is a really beautiful and courageous thing that you're doing. Next question I get is, who all will we include in the intervention? And I put that down as when, who, where, and how. So you've drawn together a group of people close to your loved one. They're often a spouse, parents, grandparents, uncles and aunts. I actually love uncles and aunts, siblings, children. I love kids at the intervention too. If they're old enough to walk and talk, or just be there quietly, I think it's great. They're always part of the negatives of the person's struggle. And I find that to have them participate in a loving intervention can really reframe the situation as something that the family is getting practice at in a new way. Other people I like at the intervention a lot are other relatives that are close, cousins, sometimes maybe the boss. I love the job there, coworkers. And then it's time for action. So everybody's coming into the family meeting, and you know that you're not going it alone, because there is strength in numbers. There is strength in numbers, and you can do together what you can apart. You've surrounded yourself with others, those voices that matter, and you're all upholding and sustaining one another. Everything's going to be okay because you're grounded in deep, genuine love. And speaking of one state of being, what's yours like? Really, just like pause for a minute and ask yourself that question. How are you doing in this moment? Just take a breath, deep below the neck, deep breath, and answer that question. How are you with this? Will you breathe out the fear with me and breathe in the hope of what you're doing? As it relates to feelings that everyone in your I team is feeling, no doubt, it goes from anxious to peaceful to raging to depressed and scared and suffering. And all of those feelings are based on a reaction to an action that hasn't yet happened. So in a bucket of intervention goo, getting ready for more good in your life is right where you're at right now. It's something you've never done before with this type of invitational intervention for most people. So be encouraged. Even if you don't feel the power, you're holding it and you're likely to succeed and you're doing great. I found that helping families understand why we respond in certain ways can be really helpful. And that gets us to something that you may never have heard of before, but it's called the polyvagal theory. It's Polyvagal theory. It's really useful in understanding our state of being, our mental health symptoms of our loved ones. And as we're talking about prioritizing safety and stability, I think it, at least in the work that I've done with families, the ones that are hungry on learning a little bit about the polyvagal theory will have a different strength going into the intervention than those that don't. Look up the polyvagal theory. And I think you'll find that it's going to help you with the intervention in being more successful. I think it'll help you be more skilled and thoughtful. And from an internal standpoint, that you'll have a different sort of strength in it. What kind of strength? Feeling safer and better without using a substance. And that's often what we're up against in the intervention, is that our loved one is coming into a family meeting and they're suffering, and we wonder, why in the world would they do that when they know that it could kill them? And we know this, that what happens to you and what triggers you into a state of suffering is often tied tightly to the ways that we self-harm through drugs and alcohol. And I bring this up here since I need to mention how another bit of therapy that most people haven't heard of, it's called internal family systems, or IFS, is really a valuable tool in understanding how we're approaching this, the help for your loved one from a trauma lens. And this means we're starting to consider how what happened to you impacts the you that you present to others. And you likely grown your ability to help someone you love. If not, you'll work with, it won't hurt you any, learning a little bit more. But I ask that you be open to this because it's something new that most people haven't heard of, both IFS, internal family systems therapy, as well as the polyvagal theory. And we're asking our loved one to be open to the possibility of change. And I think if you can mirror that, it's really useful. In the spirit of giving you a Cliff Notes version of it, here it is. There's a part of us, each human being, that's called the autonomic nervous system. And this has in it the memory of trauma, of adverse childhood experiences and chronic stress that each of us have endured. All that to say, our autonomic nervous system is often very nervous and in this unnatural state where it has trouble identifying what is safe, what is dangerous. And imagine that if your core functioning operating system has trouble identifying if you should run into the house that's on fire or run out of the house that's on fire. And that's a bit of a window into what the polyvagal theory will help us better understand, because our autonomic nervous system takes care of a lot of what's going in the background, the stuff our bodies do without us even having to consciously make it happen, like heart beating, body temperature, stress response. Our autonomic nervous system is constantly working in the background, scanning what's out there, and then we respond to it in the best way. Now, you probably heard of fight or flight, right? Those are the two categories that we're often familiar with, but I'll add to that safe, and then add to that another mobilized. That is, we know that we're mobilized when we're ready to take on the needs of being immobilized. That's when we freeze to the flight response. And when your autonomic nervous system detects that the danger outside is too great, it shuts you down into a freeze. It shuts you down. And in that state, heart rate, blood pressure, body temperature decreases. And then your body releases these pain numbing endorphins into the body. It's amazing all that goes on behind the scenes while we're busy with life. And in the life of our loved one who's suffering, their autonomic nervous system is often fraught with habits, that it's ways in which it's learned to deal with life that then more easily push it toward numbing agents, alcohol, drugs, eating disorder behaviors. And all of this automated work that helps us navigate a life as it should be occurs while we're moving from one state to another. So we have this resilient or bounce back response. And then when we get hurt or traumatized or we're under chronic stress, it can really screw up our detection system, so that if we're seeking to be in a safe space, our body continues to tell us we're in an unsafe space, that we're in danger. And in this way, what happens is the firefighter part of us, this is IFS theory then, comes out. And so when the firefighter comes out and we're at a birthday party and we start hosing everybody down, it's like it's the wrong part of us is showing up at the wrong time, even as we need the firefighter for the right time. Parts of us get confused due to this internal operating system getting burdened and confused by the hurt that we're experiencing. So thinking of it in another way, imagine that your smoke detector at the house starts going off when there's a cake in the oven instead of when there's a fire, and vice versa. Both exhibit a danger of sorts, at least the symptom of danger. But you don't need to run from the house if it's just a cake in the oven, where if the house is on fire, you definitely want to run and make sure everybody that's in the house is out of the house too. But in this way, when our state of survival gets really screwed up, it's really easy to turn on adaptive strategies like drugs and alcohol, too much work, digital devices, exercise, sex. Those change our state of being too, and help us move out of those feelings that we get stuck in. The thinking on trauma over the past 30 years has grown so much. And if you can imagine that trauma is this category, and then under it exists these definers: shock trauma. That includes events like an accident, assault, natural disaster, or even war. Then there's relational trauma, and this includes events that happened and didn't happen: neglect, lack of safety, abuse, chronic adversity, and the like. And then other trauma, that might include experiences of enduring survivor trauma, chronic toxic stress, adverse community situations, even childhood medical procedures, poverty. Intergenerational trauma can also, research shows, be passed down through 3 generations. In the past, the thinking on trauma was about stuff that actually happened to us. I was beaten. I was blown off the wall in Iraq. I wasn't, but as an example. And what we've learned as we learn more about trauma is the impact of nurturing events that should have happened but didn't happen are also traumatizing. Often trauma is not an event, and in that our response to the experience creates the trauma event. And the more adverse experience one goes through, the greater risk increases of drug abuse and drug use, suicide attempt, obesity, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and that list goes on and on and on. If you can tee this up as an introduction to the polyvagal theory and a little IFS, you can see how self-soothing and, really quote unquote, getting through is often for our loved one a response to trauma that makes a sense if you can open your heart and mind to the possibility of why our loved one is doing what they're doing in spite of the reality that it hurts them. Remember this too, because we've learned so much about adverse childhood events that as little kids, as little ones, our number one need is attaching to those that give us care. And when those people who ought to provide care don't, our attachment wiring gets screwed up as it relates to connecting with people and creatures and things and substances, big and small. The polyvagal theory centers on the role of the vagus nerve plays in how we make social connections, how we respond when we get afraid, and how we regulate our emotions. It takes its name from the vagus. It's a cranial nerve that forms the primary component or part of your parasympathetic nervous system. You're going to have to look it up to learn more. And there's some kind of cool videos too that we'll link below, but it'll be worth it if you gain some understanding of some new things, and probably some new things about how your loved one does what they do and why, and also about yourself, about why you do some of the things that you do. Know this: there is no time like the present, as they say. And generally, the sooner you make the invitation, the better it is for everyone. And the reason why I included this information in this section is because you are inviting a person with trauma to participate in a family meeting. And so it's so important that you're able to make the invitation in a way that helps them know that this is a safe and stable event. We're not going to beat them up. We're not going to shame them any further than they are feeling. And we're going to love on them. And there's no reason to suffer is part of the invitation we can make. And that goes for each of our IT members too. Often the intervention is a moment in time where even the participants can look at their lives and hold each other accountable to this and ask themselves the question, what might I be open to changing? For the family intervention, it's really important that when we set the date, that we keep the date and we don't move it. And in that way, the process begins this momentum that keeps building and isn't easily pushed to the side for a new date or something of that nature. To the family meeting, our goal is to produce a yes. And the setting for the family meeting needs to be kept in mind. The family meeting is held in familiar surroundings. Most often it's in someone's home. I don't like to do it in a hotel or a sterile surrounding. The point is to make a safe space, a space where the identified loved one can most easily say yes to not only coming, but then participating and listening. For example, we wouldn't want to set the intervention at some place that's 2 hours away from the ILO's home and say, hey, we love you. We're having this family meeting. We haven't known what to do, and we're so worried about you. So we've decided to have a family meeting, an intervention, and you're invited. We want you to be there so we can talk with you rather than just about you. And it's 2 hours away by bus. Do you follow me? We want to make it as easy as possible for the identified loved one to say yes. And I go into this chunk more coming up in the next videos. So digest what I just said, and we'll go deeper shortly. As C.S. Lewis says in the kids' classic, I'm reminded of this quote again and again. The book is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. He says, Aslan is on the move. And in this intervention, we are on the move, and you're doing it. You are doing the right thing. You're doing the good thing, and you're doing the responsible, loving thing. So keep your chin up, pick your head up, step up, show up. And remember, we don't take no for an answer.